Mayor Council, we have moved forward with our land use plan. Right now, if you're familiar with ours, it's a 2007 land use plan. So by we're one of the coastal communities that has to have a CAMA land use plan. So every 5 years, you're supposed to update the land use plan. We're a little behind the curve on that one, but basically, it's most communities are because CAMA was rewriting their rules. But the land use plan is what we look to and town council looks to when there's new policies guiding the new development in Carolina Beach. So it's an important document that we keep updated so we have a vision for what the community is now and what it will look like in the future. So when you see those text amendments or changes to policies and procedures that you're trying to make a decision at, we're trying to glean information from that document. So it's a very important document for the town, and it's something that we're hoping to get a lot of involvement from the community through this process. So we've put out a request for proposals, and we received five proposals back. One was from InFocus, one was from Holland Consulting, Benchmark, who's doing our joint land use study with Matsu, and then the Cape Fear Council of Government also submitted a proposal. After looking at, and the fifth one being Stewart, after looking at all of them, Stewart Engineering really stood out, and for a variety of reasons. But one of the things that we really liked about Stewart is the diversity that they offered in their resources. They have quite a bit of resources that they have over the last couple years put towards their planning efforts. So we will have dedicated folks that have expertise in GIS, planning, engineering, landscape architecture, all dedicated to working on our plan. And they came back cheaper than everybody else too, so that always helps. One of the big things that we always that we wanted to look at with all the proposals is what's the timeline, because we know it takes some time to do a land use plan, but you don't want it to drag on too long where people get disinterested. And that's one thing we liked about it. This is about a year process, and the proposals range from about a year to year and a half. And their proposal, what Stewart offered, really gave us what I think Carolina Beach wants, which is a lot of initiative to get the word out and get people involved in the land use plan. And you see the initiation there on the first section. They're used to going out, and Carolina Beach has a lot of events, so they will attend those events and get people excited about the land use plan. They will have a website for the land use plan, Facebook page, Twitter page, all that kind of stuff. We're looking at October 11th as our kickoff meeting, and that is 2 days after your council meeting. That's our Planning and Zoning Commission meeting. We're looking at meeting probably a little earlier in the afternoon that day if it works for council, probably around 4, and it'll be a joint meeting with Planning Board and Town Council, and we can talk about moving forward how everything's going to be set up with the advisory board for the land use plan, and work through all the logistics, and then just basically promoting the plan and moving forward. That meeting will also, we actually had planned to have the joint meeting. We'll talk about landscaping and tree preservation in Carolina Beach as well. So that was going to be our dual purpose. So it's something that I think we talked about before that council was interested in, planning board, making sure the two boards are on the same level for what the vision of Carolina Beach should be is one thing we talked about even before we were thinking about having this as a land use plan joint meeting. So kickoff meeting. So I think that'll work well for us. After that, they will go into a process of inventorying what we have here at Carolina Beach. What's our infrastructure? What are the existing uses in Carolina Beach? Start mapping some of that stuff out and looking at where new development is going to occur and redevelopment. And then the meat and potatoes, the draft, is when you really get the community involved, and the last part of the land use plan process. And that's when you're working with your committees on trying to formulate those policies. And those are the meetings that really get where we really hash through the issues. The 2007 land use plan, the big one was height, building height in Carolina Beach. You know, that was very controversial at the time. It was 35 feet all over Carolina Beach, and we changed it in 2003, I believe. It was right around the time Jeremy and I were starting, and in a zoning text amendment, changed it from 35 to 50 feet. And 35 was the height, but there were a lot of appurtenances you could have over 50, and we said, hey, well, let's just clean it up, we'll make it 50. Well, we didn't change the land use plan, and we are required to have a CAMA land use plan, so we were building for a couple years after that. It was probably 05 when we came back, and CAMA's like, you cannot issue these permits for 50 feet. So we basically had to have a moratorium on all structures in the area of environmental concern. Nobody could build houses, and we were booming then. So the land use plan is a big deal. Those policies are a big deal, and we need to make sure that we really think those things through and get people involved in that process. The first part of the meeting, again, or the process, again, they'll be basically listening to us. They're going to be looking at special interest groups, finding out what the community has done in the past, what long-range plans do we have, what common denominators are in all those plans, looking at our infrastructure, what we have in place. One of the big things that we want them to do is look at the areas where we're going to have growth and do some build-out scenarios for Carolina Beach. And we want this to be a living, breathing document where it can be incorporated with spreadsheets that we can go in and update even after they're gone, and look at how we're building out and how we are in comparison to the capacities for the town to handle that additional growth. So that's our hope versus the 2007 plan, and most plans just give you a snapshot. We want it to build so staff can maintain that land use plan. We'll still have to update it with the policies, but we can keep everything up to date as far as how we stand with future build out. We did talk to quite a few people that were using Stewart Engineering. This is a new branch for them, and they have done they're involved in quite a few and have done quite a few land use plans. And for the other communities are extremely excited about the level of involvement that they've had with their community, or that Stewart Engineering has had with their community. So that's really one of the things that sold us on it, is they really get out there, get the folks involved, and make sure we get the input we need to create the plan. If you look at our 07 land classification map, which is what you have in your land use plan as what things should look like in the future, basically how our zoning should look in the future. and you compare that to the zoning map that was adopted at the time, they're identical. So I don't think there was a lot of thought put into uh, what should Carolina Beach look like. It was just like, hey, let's take, this is what the folks had for zoning. Let's just mimic that for our land classification map. We want to get a little more involved in that. Carolina Beach is really, we have probably one of the most lenient non-conforming codes in the state, and that's because we value a lot of those structures that were built that maybe there's a sixplex or 12 unit condos, and now that zone only allows for 1 or 2 family development. Well, Carolina Beach, what we've heard since we've been here is we value those. Maybe we want to identify those. If there's a lot in the area, that be a distinct area on our land classification map. So those are the types of things that we want to look at and make sure that we're addressing this time that we didn't address in the '07 plan. So it is a process that has to go through CAMA, and there are a lot of logistical hurdles, and that's another thing we liked about Stewart Engineering is they walk with us all the way through that process. And they are available all the way up until we adopt the plan, and then 6 months after they maintain availability to us to work on any issues we're having with the plan. So that's basically the overview that we have. Now we're excited to get started. We're going to have planning staff will be inundated with working with them very closely. They have a GIS person who will be working closely with Gigi. We have our two, Miles and Jeremy in planning, and myself that will be working with their planners, and hoping that this will be a good plan to serve the community for years to come. Yes, sir.
Turn my mic on, sorry. One thing I've learned this year is every time somebody comes up and they present to us in regards to their plan or something that they've been researching, they're not taking into account the outer influences, like our traffic pattern, then take into consideration of our pedestrian, our bikes, as well as our golf carts. So is this something that during this time frame, they're going to look into everything that encompasses in our community so we are aware of what the growth is going to be?
Absolutely, absolutely, and that's the first half of the plan is going to be them researching Carolina Beach, looking at our long-range plans, looking at how we operate, what's our infrastructure look like as far as water, sewer, wastewater treatment, streets, all those types of things they're going to look at and see what we have in place now, and then take those same documents and see what the vision is in those documents. We just had a new Parks and Rec plan. We just had a new pedestrian plan. Incorporate those same things into, or they're going to look at incorporating those same things into the land use plan, and then trying to get that input from the community.
Last time you also said they mimicked what it was previous in that plan.
So that I was talking about the land classification map. I think we started that land use plan in '03, and we adopted it late. We call it the '07 plan, but I think it was '08 before it actually got adopted. We don't want that to happen again. We had people get excited about the plan and then get disinterested, and another group came on and got excited. We want to make sure we get the word out and get everybody in at the beginning, and things got forgotten. And that's what back to your question is there wasn't enough emphasis put on that land classification map. At the time, we just took the zoning map and changed it to read land classification map, and there's very little differences. I think the peers recognized on there, which is good.
Refresh our memory on when you talk about a land classification map versus a zoning map, what's the difference? What's technically supposed to be the difference? What's the use difference?
So when you're doing a rezoning. You're changing that zoning map. So if somebody's in T1 and they want to go to Central Business District, then we have to look at that. We can do that through a zoning map amendment. But you also, if that zone is in the area of environmental concern, which in that example it most likely would be, you have to be consistent with your land use plan. So your land classification map, if it already shows that change, then you can move forward. If it doesn't, then you have to change your land classification map. Your land classification map is your future, your vision of, you have your zoning now. Maybe that zoning is not exactly like what you want to see, what the community wants to see for Carolina Beach. That land classification map should be that map.
So that's where some of the changes last time came in the Highway Business District and the Harbor, when we did some changes. And then over the last couple of years, we've seen some uses come back into the Marina Business District that were specifically not included, and we've had to adjust some of those maps. So that's the overlay, and it does get kind of confusing. I mean, so Ed, I had a couple others along what Joe Dan was talking about. I just want to make sure, because I've heard from Gil, for example, we've done some projects and maybe we got halfway through them and no one had gone back and said, how does this work with the infrastructure plan that he's working on, and the bike and ped plan or the Parks and Recs plan, and just to make sure that we get all of those existing plans folded into the analysis and updated so that we're not, going down one path with one group and then all of a sudden a year later we come back and say, oh, we didn't ask them and we didn't put the bike lane on St. Joseph because no one knew the pike, just to make sure that those all get tied in. And same with our joint land use plan with Matsu, we should make sure that that's in there. My other question was, you talked about future build out and what we look like. Can we just make sure we look at those utilities conversations? I know over the past 2 years we've had a number of people ask about, and the P&Z looked at it, auxiliary structures, secondary changes to the zoning that would allow more density. And one of the concerns we had out of the utilities is you can't just go back and take all these lots and allow a second structure because you're going to double our utility demand, and we may not have that infrastructure in place. So I just want to kind of make sure that that's on the list.
Yes, sir.
And then my biggest question was, what are we doing? Last time we had a identified group of residents that were involved from the kickoff all the way through the process. So are we going to identify some kind of steering committee or
Ad hoc
stakeholder group or a group of citizens that are going to be involved all the way through the process?
We are, and we're going to be meeting with Stewart Engineering to discuss that, and at your kickoff meeting, we're hoping to work through a lot of those kickoff logistics to get that type of stuff in place or get it moving.
Well, I'd like to understand before that gets too far down that path, how many Stewart Engineering, how many people is workable in a residents, business owners, ad hoc committee, steering group that's going to help shepherd and gather this information and kind of be the intermediary between the public and Stewart and staff. And how many people on that committee? How are they selected? What are their backgrounds? What are we looking for? Who's going to decide who's on that committee? What's that process? What's that timeline?
So what you're looking for is a recommendation from our consultant on what they've seen that works in other areas of the size and makeup of that steering committee, and have that before y'all get to the kickoff meeting, so you can chime in if you need a different business representative or if you need more residential representation or something like that. Is that correct?
Yep. Just generally, what's a workable group? We don't want 25 people, but you don't want 3. I don't want Joe Dan picking everybody. I'm sure Joe Dan doesn't want me picking everybody.
That is true.
I'm sure staff, have some insight on who.
Maybe have a liaison from the committees as well, because
I mean,
it's
let's
affecting all
think
them.
through that. This is the most significant guiding document that we're going to be involved in collectively for a while.
Right.
So we need to make sure that we have in my opinion, a wide breadth of people that may or may not always be in attendance here at council, and may or may not always be involved, but have great experience. I mean, we've got some of those guys on the canal committee that have stepped up. I just want to make sure that we have the right group, and it's a manageable group, so that council can, we can kind of stay out of that and
let them deal with the minutia of things, and you deal with the policy aspect of those items. That, most definitely, I think one of the things that majority of us in this room weren't here when you did the last land use plan. Jeremy and Ed started about that time, so a lot of the initial planning and work that went into it had already been completed. I think what you'll find this time is that we're making sure that we've learned from some of the things that we've seen over the past few years with this plan to make sure that we include all those items that we've been talking about. During this transition time since 2007 to now, we've done a lot of plans, and we've put a lot of plans in place and started down those areas. I think those will be very influential for this plan in the future. So I think that you'll see that this will be much more comprehensive than what may have taken place previously. And that's really what you're looking for in a land use plan.
Hey, Ed, and two questions, and I'll apologize in advance since I have to bug out and get to Wilmington. Number one, Michael, we do have, what is it, $50,000 budgeted for the plan implementation? It's in the 18-19 budget.
It is in the budget. I think you're right that it is 50,000. So having us go through the process of choosing the consultant and then authorizing that consultant, that's already in the budget.
Okay. Second one is I noticed that the land use plan follows the implementation of the joint land use study. So to what extent do the two intersect or complement each other? I know land use plan is more directive as opposed to the recommendations that you and I and Michael will be a part of when we complete the land use plan. So does one supersede the other? I guess that's my question.
I think it's going to be that they absolutely, or this land use plan that we're working on for the town, is the recommendations in that joint land use study are going to be absolutely essential because of our build-out scenarios, because a lot of our infrastructure and ability to expand is dependent on what we can do in that Matsu buffer. So it's however that works out, that's those recommendations that we get back and what Benchmark puts forward, and we look very seriously at using Benchmark for this plan because they were doing the joint land use study. But in the end, Stewart had the right mix, I think, for Carolina Beach.
I think what you'll find is that many of the things that will be talked about and discussed in the joint land use plan with Matsu will need to be taken into consideration when we do the land use plan for CAMA. And a good example of that is there's always been a discussion of height requirements. The joint land use plan is going to say don't want you to build any higher than this because it negatively impacts X for the joint land use plan. We're going to have to take those types of things into consideration. Now, at the present time, we don't have any conflict in height restrictions between what they say and what our plan says. So I don't envision that there will be a conflict in the future, but we'll make sure that those things are taken into account when we do this and address all of those items.
But
which is a little bit different than what the colonel told us when he was here.
How so?
Well, he told us they were going to look at and they were interested in what our land uses were, but he didn't see them making any significant demands or requests of us. One of the questions that came up was specifically height, and certainly understand that the likelihood of Carolina Beach expanding along the Matsu corridor with tall structures is probably pretty slim. But changing what we can do on our land use plan, he was pretty clear that he wasn't going to be making, or he didn't feel there was going to be a lot of demands or pressures on us to change things. That's not exactly what I just heard from you or from Ed saying we need to make sure their recommendations come and we fold them in there. So
No,
I'm a little cautious that we make sure we understand exactly how.
Steve, to your point, the deliverable with the joint land use study outside the buffer zone are a series of recommendations
Right.
that we can, if we choose, or may not choose to implement outside the buffer zone in our
And
municipality.
those recommendations are what we tried to get out of the colonel when he was here, and we're still in the early parts of that process. When do you expect that joint land use plan or study, because it's a land use study, it's not so much a plan. We're developing a plan, they have a study. So when do we expect those deliverables on the joint land use study?
If I remember the schedule correctly, it's about halfway through our process for land use plan. So in the spring sometime. This is a year-long process for us, so I think it's in that 6-month time frame. I understand where you're coming from. I don't want to make it seem like the joint land use plan is going to be any more impactful on our land use plan than our pedestrian plan or our bicycle plan or our master plan is. It's taking all those things together and making sure that they all meet the same need. So it's not necessarily that their plan is going to say something that will have to impact us. And I don't think that that's really the case. It's just making sure that we take those things into account and make sure that the plans don't conflict with each other.
And when they do, Michael, the Office of Economic Adjustment, DOD agency, provides funding where we adopt recommendations, keyword recommendations from the study, that may be contrary to what our land use plan originally intends. So it sounds like, I guess going back to the question, the study may guide our land use plan, but it doesn't supersede anything we intend to do as a municipality.
That's correct.
Okay.
Do you not agree with that, Steve? What's the look on your?
No, I agree. One is a study.
Yep.
Ours is a land use plan. When the federal government comes in and tells you they have a joint land use study and they would prefer you do this or that, we need to listen to that and pay attention to it. I suspect we're going to have very little conflict. They're looking at intensity, from what I've gathered from that meeting we had and several other conversations I've been involved in. They're looking at intensity of development along their property line. On the height issue, I haven't gotten the sense from our community and our residents that they're looking to expand dramatically any heights or go any intense development. On the contrary, we hear the other. Just looking at this photograph that's up there where it says recapturing the spirit, that's part of that downtown business plan that was done, and all of a sudden that showed up when we had a brief parking deck description and people were all freaked out about structures and size, and it was pretty clear our community didn't want that.
Yep.
That's probably more going to be a concern, Joe Dan, with Matsu on that joint land use study, is those large structures, because any kind of blast zone. But by the same token, I want to make sure we understand what it is early in our process so that we don't spend $50,000, get halfway through, and all of a sudden they throw something out there that we hadn't calibrated into our discussion, and just want to make sure that it's one of those plans that we're overlaying in there and when they're deliverables. Theirs is a study, but their study comes with some pretty big pressure.
Yep.
I mean, but I don't see us doing a huge development along the Matsu corridor that's going to have all this intense, high-density interface.
No, and I think you're right that I don't see out of the conversations that we've had to date that there's going to be much difference between what our interaction is with Matsu at the present time for land use and what our future is going to be.
Our biggest is going to be that utility.
And
Which came up in an email the other day. We were talking about some restructuring over at the wastewater treatment plant, and that's probably the single biggest thing we need to be working with in my opinion, Sunny Point on, is getting permission to expand our municipal infrastructure treatment facilities, water and sewer, in their property on an unmanned or minimal personnel basis. That's what stresses them out, is people in their buffer zone. But we've got nowhere else to expand. And when Gil comes back and says we're at 70%, we got to start putting together a wastewater treatment plan and permit.
Hence the invitation to Colonel Carlisle to come out and take
I'd be
a look at
cautious
it.
of that invitation only because we've got a bunch of equipment that's parked over there that, when I drove by the other day, my understanding, we had written permission to do a debris pile over by the old garage.
What we have is a written memorandum of understanding, which we can provide to you if you'd like, that states not only vegetative debris, but also household and construction debris specifically for the storm and a time frame associated to that.
Okay.
All the things that we currently have over there now for those activities are items that fall
When I
underneath
went over
that.
the other day and I saw that big fuel truck, I think it was a fuel truck, there was some kind of tanker truck parked there, and the guy was sitting there waiting. I don't know if he's still there because I haven't been by in the last few days. He was by the big pile of vegetative debris.
Mhm.
That was one. I was surprised to see a tanker truck sitting there because we've had such environmental costs and problems for fuel and other material. I don't know what was in that truck. It could have been empty. I don't know. And then I saw probably 6 to 8 other vehicles parked over by where we piled. We have soils piles right inside the fence on the wastewater treatment road. There was a half a dozen big vehicles parked in there. All I'm saying is the last time Fuller was here, he ripped us up for stockpiling dirt next to the baseball diamond and told us we didn't have permission. So, I don't want to get him over here, and it's not the colonel, it's Fuller that's going, one of those other guys is going to say something about, you don't have permission to put that there.
However, at this point, we do, and we made sure that we have it in writing. So yes, sir, we are covered in that regard.
We've
Yeah,
got
it's-
that, then you let us know when you want to do it, but she's open to come over and look at it. The joint land use study provides a pretty good time to at some point in time.
Yeah, I'd love to have the colonel anytime we can have him over here. I'm just saying,
Cautious to.
be careful.
Let's make sure we're in compliance.
It is a time, we have 90 days for that agreement.
I was specifically talking about the vehicles that were in the wastewater treatment plant area up front on Galway.
Yes, sir. And those are all approved because of the debris removal and the household.
Okay.
Yeah, I think regarding the land use plan, those of us in the joint land use study ought to liaise when the time is right with that ad hoc committee or whatever we recommend cobbled together for the land use plan, just for consistency.
Ed,
Sure, makes
Thanks,
sense.
Ed.
Mike, 90-day. We have a 90-day leeway. You said for that.
The
Sir.
storm debris agreement is 90 days, and we've had to extend it, so it's not like it's set in stone.
When we get closer to that, about 2-week time frame, can we just send something out to council saying, "Hey, quick walkthrough, just letting you guys know that keep in compliance with that."
Certainly,
Thank
you
you.
can inspect it anytime.
I trust you guys. Thanks, Ed.
Okay, thank you. Good morning. All right. I don't want to belabor the beginning part of this, but I do want to background a little bit on our current practice. So our current practice is to only adjust our salary ranges whenever we do a cost of living as a part of the budget, which we have not done in the last few years, which we'll talk about in a moment. Our current salary ranges were put into place in 2015 when we did our classification and pay study.
Holly, can you pull that a little closer to you?
Microphone?
Yeah.
Yes, I can. Ed's taller.
or up, however, I don't know. I can't really hear you.
How's that? Is that better?
Speak
Put
into
on my
the
mean
mic.
mommy voice.
Perfect, perfect.
She
Right.
did that.
So about every 5 years, we do a classification and pay study. Right now, we're thinking we'll do our next one for budget year 19, deliverable in 20. And that will keep us on our 5-year trend that we've been doing. Historically, our salary ranges last moved up in 2% in 2016, 2017 fiscal year, and they have not moved since then. And however, employees do continue to earn their merit increases based on the amount that they are awarded based on their written appraisal that happens every year and up to the amount that you approve as a part of the budget every year.
Holly, walk me through some of this, because it's been a long time since we talked this. When you talk about a salary range, let's just say you have a person that's coming to work in a particular department for a defined job. They have a range that starts them at, give me some ideas. I mean, so we start like
Sure, we have a,
$30,000 and it goes up to $38,000 for that job classification.
that's correct.
And we start them at a particular point. And how do we establish what point in that range we start them at?
Obviously, we would like to start them as close to the minimum as possible. However, people do come with education, background, experience, skill sets. You know, if Gil needs somebody that already has a CDL or other skill sets, certifications, maybe some required state certifications, we will pay a little bit more for those. We also keep an eye on what's trending in the community and what we have to pay to be competitive.
We get a range, we get an employee that starts with us, and let's say it's a $30,000 to a $40,000 range for that job, and we start them at 32. How do they move up in that pay range? Is it longevity strictly, or is it?
The only way they can currently move in that range is by a COLA, which you all do at budget each year, or through their annual Meritorious Award that they earn based on their meritorious
So
service.
if they're in a salary range of 30 to 40, they don't automatically get a chance to move up because they've been here for 3 years or 5 years.
We do not do longevity that way. We do longevity every year around
With a check.
with a little check around Thanksgiving.
So the purpose of the salary range is just to establish their qualification for that job description and how they would compare pay scale-wise with another applicant. But once they get hired, they're locked in at that pay scale.
They're locked in at that pay scale, and the only way they move is through their own merit.
That's it, through their own merit,
Through
through
their
their
own-
pay.
That's correct. Or through a COLA program if you choose to do that during the budget process.
Does the COLA program move the entire pay range up, or just their individual status within that?
Both. So you're picking up the whole range and moving the whole range, and you're also moving all of the dots on the range by the same amount.
If you think about it, the way that the ranges are set up, they aren't set up for individual people. They're set up for categories of positions. So maintenance worker 1 may be 30 to 40,000. Right now, the way that it's structured, if council awards a 2% COLA, and I'm just using general numbers here, that range will go up by 2%. You have also awarded to that person that's in that range that 2% monetary value for their income. So because the pay range moves with the COLA, that is the indicator that we are staying with the general cost of that position compared to other communities.
The reason I'm asking this is because over the last number of years, we've had instances where you've come to us, or staff's come to us and said, I have a specific individual that has moved up to the top of their pay range. And I need to either create a new classification or move them into a new pay range. And I'm wondering how they move up, because we're either doing it on a merit base or we're doing it on a COLA. And we haven't moved those COLAs that rapidly to move someone through the top of that pay scale. So have they done it through continuing education, job improvements, they've got more qualification?
Yes, quite often what happens if we come back to council and say we want to add a new grade or a new level for a position, the reason we would do that is because we're seeing an evolution of that position. We want them to have more responsibility in X, Y, or Z, and that could be education or training or their job experience.
So what I'm
And
trying to get to is we do have our employees have the ability to move up the pay scale. I mean, if a person comes to work and I'll just pick on Jeremy because Jeremy's
How's he sitting there?
sitting here. But Jeremy comes to town and all of a sudden he's doing more and he sees an opportunity to increase his pay scale. He's not going to be locked in forever at that rate just waiting for a COLA.
Or he gets a yearly merit.
in that
The merit, right, it's a one-time check.
Merit's like a bonus.
in that
Right.
position, you're locked in. However, if we change the position, which is what I was referring to, and give that position more responsibility, change it so that they have different things that they do, yes, we can create other pay ranges for that person to go into. But primarily, no, it's locked into that pay range, period.
Definition of the position is what establishes the pay range.
Yes.
Yes,
Defined for that job.
Yes.
So who
Yes.
then starts defining the job descriptions that increase the pay? I'm just trying to get.
the town staff, when we went through our last pay study, which was 4 or 5 years ago, one of the items was establishing what was in each job range. What were the positions? What were the position requirements? What were the requirements for education and so forth? That was all done and presented to us. We said, yep, that looks very similar to what we have over here, which is what we have currently. We may have changed a few things because, you know, you now need a CPA license to do accounting in a municipal setting or something of that nature, where our ranges didn't, our position descriptions didn't reflect that. So that's how we've come up with those things and how it's traditionally been handled.
And if your position, that definition, there's nothing that you can move forward beyond that position, then you're capped out after X number of years.
Basically, yes,
Yeah,
sir.
the only thing that changes that is that the COLA moves the whole,
Or they
Pay
switch a
scale up.
position.
right. But then they would still be at the top.
You can,
Or if we redefine the position and add more responsibilities to that position,
Then we expand it.
decision of staff.
So what
Yes,
you're saying is
which
this
is
maximum
typical-
isn't really a number.
pardon
I mean,
me?
I'm trying to understand what you're all saying. I see a minimum on this chart,
Leanne,
maximum.
to give you an idea,
And
not to cut you off, to give you an idea what he's saying, is that if somebody comes in
I
and,
didn't get to ask, but go ahead.
so, go ahead and then I'll.
You
I'll-
go. You
no,
go first.
Ladies first.
Help me understand because I don't do COLA. I don't. My business doesn't.
Yeah, so you hire somebody that
Help
works
me
in your business to clean up a bedroom, clean up your rooms. You hire them at say 10,000 a year. Unless there's a position that they can grow into after that position, your cap for that employee may only be 12,000.
Right, but you're saying that every time you give a COLA, that cap rises.
And yes, and currently that's how the system is set up, and the reason why it's set up that way is to keep comparison with other communities in the area that have like positions. One of the things that we do when we do a 5-year pay study is we evaluate where we compare against other like positions for other governments. So in this general area, how do we compare for salary and benefits? And typically what we see is that there is always a change in that a position becomes more valuable as time goes on because you have less people that are qualified for that position.
Okay, so let me just put it simply. If the maximum is whatever this number is, 45,000, are you saying every time you get a COLA, that maximum raises?
Goes up by that COLA, yes, ma'am.
That's all I need to know.
Yes, ma'am.
So there is really not a maximum.
Well, the maximum
Those numbers
continually
don't mean
moves.
anything. To me, just very simply, they don't mean anything if it can raise. It's not a maximum if it
Well,
can
it
grow.
doesn't raise unless we change it as a council.
No, I get that.
Yes,
I get that.
I understand where you're coming from, and yes, that's one way to look at it.
And that's
that-
I'm looking at it real simply. So my next question is, why are we looking at this outside of our budget? That we talked about all this, I think, back in July, and I don't understand why it's here now.
because what we did at the budget impacted how it affects our employees as a policy. And for instance, last year we didn't do a COLA. Okay, staff looked at that and said, okay, this is maybe a one-time blip. We'll see if there's a trend, and we aren't going to do COLAs anymore. So we didn't look at how it negatively impacts the employees that are already here in that. This year, when we also did a no COLA, we looked at it and said, well, okay, that means now that we've had 2 years of no COLA, the range for that position has not moved in 2 years because it was tied to the COLA. And what we're suggesting in this point is, instead of tying it to a COLA, which council approves every year, we make it tied to something that compares it against the region and against those positions, which is the CPI index. And Holly hasn't been able to get to this yet, but have it so the range continually moves so that by the 5th year when we come back to you and say we're going to do another pay study, we don't have to fork out another $75,000 right off the bat, which is one of the things that we had to do this last time. Is because the position ranges never changed, then we were now demonstrably lower in our salary ranges than what other comparable communities were.
But these salaries don't have any value on the benefits and medical benefits and retirement. Those benefits are in addition to these salaries.
Yes. Now they can one policy can impact the other. For instance, if in this case you have 2 years where you haven't done COLAs and your pay ranges haven't adjusted,
Yeah.
then that means that the individual in those pay ranges may not have the ability to increase the amount that goes into their retirement because of that.
So for me, just simply again, and I know you got more to, I would like to see what the value of the benefit package is as well, in addition to the salary. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Just as Michael said, here is our 10-year COLA history. We've had 2008 increase, and then we had the years with the recession. We didn't, and then we got back on track, 14, 15, 15, 16, 16, 17, and then nothing since those years. And so as Michael said, the ranges have been stagnant since then.
60% stagnant since a 10-year time frame.
Yes.
So here's our present challenge, and Leanne, here's why we're talking about this. We have long tenured employees with significant time in their current positions who have been awarded their annual merit increases as we've gone along, but now they've hit this maximum for their pay range. And
My question, how are they hitting the maximum for their pay range if they haven't, I mean, what moves them up the pay range? And you
Without
said-
COLA.
Without
merit.
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 No.
Merit is
Same.
at
Merit
base.
is
Annual increase.
is a increase on your base rate. So if I make $100,000 and I get a 10% increase for merit, then my base rate goes up to $110,000, which the
merit pay last year, Michael, we gave it 2% or whatever the merit is, right? And that's based on, the department, the head of the
Evaluation.
department, allocating those merit dollars throughout the department. That's a permanent increase to the pay scale?
If you're not
it's
capped out.
it's a increase to the individual's pay rate, not to the pay scale.
That's not the way I understood it, but I understand your question now.
That's not the way, is that the way you understood it?
Yeah.
Whether you understood it
Annually,
that
you
way
get
or
a
not,
review. In that
that's-
review, you can meet up
Understand whether or
to.
not I understood it, Michael.
I mean,
get
that
What I'm saying is back up to the previous slide. Please, again, one more. The one that had the 10-year study on it.
Mm-hmm. Sorry, wrong direction.
Yeah. One back.
The one that had the 10-year study, right
That
there. One-time payment not added to base in 12 and 13.
That's the COLA. Not
this is COLA, not merit.
So we elected to do a one-time payment, and,
Instead of getting a pay increase, you got a $500 bonus on your check.
No, instead of getting a
COLA.
percentage COLA, you got a one-time.
minutes ago, how someone raises up through the pay rail, the range. You didn't answer that. You didn't say they get it through their merit every year. You said they're stuck at that. They don't get it over longevity, they get it. So that wasn't my understanding, and clearly I've missed that for the last 6 years, that the merit pay is a permanent addition to the pay scale, which I'm not objecting to, it's just not, I assure you that was not the way it came across.
once Kim gets done with the minutes for this, I can show you what Holly just said, which did include not only the COLA changing the pay rate for the position, but the merit changes the individual's pay, and that's how they advance up through that pay range.
So they can advance through merit, and what else?
Unless they're capped out.
Unless they're capped out. I understand that.
Yeah.
And what other way? Change
That's-
of
that's-
job description? Change job description?
If they change a job description, it changes that job, and we put them into another category, so it has a different pay range typically.
Okay.
And every year during the budget, we've shown you what those percentages are, but yes, we can definitely do that. It's basically been 3%.
Now I get it.
Okay. All right.
This
Okay.
year, we went up 4% because council requested it.
4% merit.
For
Mm-hmm.
Up to 4%.
That's correct.
Right.
So what makes merit different from COLA?
was that 4% was gonna be a one-time, it wasn't gonna be a perpetual add to the budget.
That's
We've now added 4% to the pay scale budget forever, which was not, and my bad, that wasn't crystal clear to me. What we had intended.
I don't
What I
understand
thought
why.
our intent was to make sure that the staff all got an annual bonus, the department head could give, depending on what they felt the merit was throughout their department, between 1% and 4% to each individual, but as a one-time check. What you're saying is, no, that went a 1% to 4% increase to their pay scale.
Correct.
In perpetuity.
That's what created the people getting up to the top of the pay
Oh, I
scale.
got that now. That's why I asked the question.
Well, I'm
earlier.
sorry you didn't get it before, Steve.
Yeah, me too.
It's been policy for at least the 5 years I've been here, and I think for the previous 10 years before
Yeah,
that same merit increase type policy.
So
Um,
I would like to know what percentage, I don't know how you would break this down. I'm sure Holly can do this. So in each department, did everybody get 4%, or how many people got 1%? How many got 4%?
we
I'll
can
pay-
The
we
reason
can
that's
give you.
important is it increases our budget
Of course, it is important
every
for that
year, not
reason.
just one time.
Yes, exactly.
So I'm
Every
kinda
year.
interested to know that.
And we can definitely show you the general percentages of it. Basically, we turn back as a organization, I think somewhere in the 2 to 5% range each year. Meaning, if council said up to a 4% merit, what I budget for is the maximum for everybody. And then staff, meaning the department heads, go through their procedures and say, you only should get awarded a 3%. Well, that 1% difference that I budgeted compared to what they actually gave out actually goes back into fund balance at the end of the year. So,
So-
yeah, we can show that.
Help me understand this. What then is the difference if merit is added to the base pay and so is COLA? What's the difference between merit and COLA, or is there a difference?
COLA is a one-time change to the position and
I know
to
what
the per-
the letters stand for. I'm just trying to understand the budget impact. Go ahead.
the merit is based on your performance, and you only get the amount increased on your base pay for the performance that you provide. So it's one time. COLA is a one time across all people. You get an increase of 2%, period. Whether it is merit based or not, everybody gets it. 2% off your base rate. Then, if you do merit is based on whether or not you performed well. So one person could get 1% or nothing, and the next person could get 4%.
And is COLA added to the base pay as well?
Yes.
Okay. So it's less budget impact for us to do COLA at 2%. Well, if everybody got a 4% merit.
Then it affects retirement.
We have had years when we've done both COLA and merit.
Exactly.
COLA also
Could be
then
6.
raises the entire pay range. So it allows an individual to stay within their job description pay range if that pay range raises. Whereas the merit pay just moves them within the range.
Unless they're capped out.
The top. I got you. I follow.
All right.
Okay.
Continue.
So what our present challenge is that we have long tenured employees with significant time in their current positions who have moved with this merit increase reaching the maximum of their salary range. Currently, we have 10 employees that are at the maximum for their salary range. Our written personnel policy says that when you hit the maximum of your salary range, when you do have your annual merit review and are awarded a monetary award, you will receive a lump sum payment for that award, and it does not become a part of your base pay.
Or
So that's what
retirement.
happens with employees that have currently,
Or retirement, correct?
or it does not, correct, it will adversely impact your retirement.
And that
Well,
lump
actually,
sum's
it won't.
technically a
It won't.
miscellaneous bonus.
It won't. We'll talk about that in just a moment.
Right?
What happens is if you are maxed out and you receive a lump sum check, lump sum checks are considered to be income for the purposes of retirement. So we would still take your retirement out of that and send it to the retirement system. What happens is the compounding effect does not occur if your maximum salary does not increase.
In the paycheck, that lump sum, is it considered miscellaneous bonus? The reason I ask is that it's taxed differently than what a regular pay would be, so that therefore it affect you more,
It's miscellaneous taxable income.
which is 60% from miscellaneous bonus versus your typical 20-25.
It's not
From an HR standpoint, I'm
Right.
trying to understand that because that's a huge cut going into it.
Okay, so we don't single it out as a bonus. I understand what you're saying. There is special bonus taxations. We do not. We include it in taxable earnings, so it's taxed at the employee's regular taxation rate, not at the bonus rate.
Thank you.
So an employee who's maxed out stays there at their maxed out point until we do another classification and pay study, which won't be till next year or the year after, or council approves a COLA.
Or they get a merit pay.
Well, if they're maxed out at the maximum of their established range, and they have a merit increase because they get a lump sum check. That's correct.
That does,
That's our
that
current
does not impact their,
It doesn't
Base
change
rate.
their pay rate.
it just lump sum check.
Right.
So, to the point previously made, maxed out employees are not experiencing the compounding effect of a merit pay increase to their base pay, which potentially impacts the employee's 48 consecutive highest months of earning used to calculate their retirement benefits. So for those employees who are getting close to retirement, by not allowing that compounding to occur, it is adversely affecting their retirement potential.
Couple questions really quick. The 10 people, how long have they been at their maxed out pay?
Several of them have been at maxed out pay for 3 or 4 years.
Then my second question would be how many employees are getting close to that?
Probably at least another half dozen
And then
are getting close.
and then my final question is average employee, how long do they stay with the town?
We'd have to calculate that.
Because those are things that are factors that would tie into all of this. Because if you get employees that are only here 2 to 3 years, it's not as understandable. If you get employees that are lasting longer than 10 to 15 years, then I can see how it's very impactful to them in regards to retirement.
Have that information from 2015. I'd have to update it to the current.
Thank you.
Thanks, that'd be good.
Okay. So my recommendation, staff recommendation, and what you have in front of you is a cost of living adjustment policy, which would recognize something called the Consumer Price Index, which is published monthly by the government. And the Consumer Price Index takes a basket of goods and prices it every month, and then determines the net change of that basket of goods. And it's done by regions. We happen to be in the southern region in North Carolina. And so the recommendation would be that if the Consumer Price Index for this region changes, that in policy language where council does not approve a COLA for employees, council allow me to up the maximum end of the pay range by an amount equal to, not exceed, or less than the Consumer Price Index for the southern region. So, for example, if we're budgeting and the Consumer Price Index number for, let's say, March is 2.9%, then you could direct us to open the upper end of that maximum range by amount you pick, so 2.5%, 2%, 1.75, some number that you pick, which would allow us to open up the maximum end of that range. It does not mean that the employee automatically is going to get a pay increase. What it does mean is that those employees who have reached the maximum of their pay ranges would then have the opportunity, when they had their annual merit review, to move up by whatever amount it was you had said, 2.1%, 2.5%.
So that's a way to increase the maximum of the pay range.
Correct.
And eliminate the negative impact of the compounding on your retirement for the long-term employees, yes.
But that would still be dependent upon council approving the amount, whatever it might be. But
Absolutely.
we have a guide now.
Percentage in the policy.
The CPI would be a guide for us to say, okay, in the region we had a 2.9. Or if it said there was none, then we'd know that there would be a no need, but we'd have a reference to go back to say, here's why you're not getting it, because the CPI is 0.
And essentially what that'll do over the long term is every 5 years when we do a pay study and we compare ourselves against other communities, it will keep us in line with those other communities for our pay ranges
So we'll have
better, so that we won't have a immediate, oh, we did a pay study and now we have to fork out an additional $100,000 to bring everybody up to a certain level.
because if everybody else in the region adjusts by that CPI, and do they do that, or the more areas?
It's mixed. There's a mixture on how different communities do it.
The big hit, we take smaller increments,
Yeah.
but still have the control of the budget, because until we agree to what we do, then it doesn't change anything. But so we still have control of that, but it does give us a better guide. I like that.
It allows you to keep your long-term employees that are really asset to all of the employees that are asset to the community, but those folks that we want to keep here, they're maxed out, and there's no opportunity for growth. They're going to look for somewhere where they can grow.
Well, and especially if the closer they get to retirement, those last 4 years are very crucial to how much they're going to receive in their pension for the rest of their days. And so I see how that could be impactful, for sure.
So this slide just has a procedural statement that I would like to put into the policy that just says that each year after you approve the budget, and you allow for a increase, then I'll increase the ranges. And the second bullet there just is how we would state that policy language that says that if you did approve the movement up to the CPI, then would adjust that, and also merit increases would still be awarded, and if you hit your maximum, even after we move this range, then you would just get that remaining amount in a lump sum payment. So that's just some policy language there.
Yeah, and just adjust that to match what this would adjust. So, very good.
And
Any
then,
other questions?
and then I just gave you just some little sample numbers off the current sheet
Good.
and drafted the policy.
Any questions for Holly?
I have a question that has nothing to do with this. This kind of tied into the pay. The email from yesterday, Mike, in regard to the recap of, I think, manager's hour pay. Can you break that down a little bit for us?
Sorry. What exactly are the
Did
update?
it
from
say
the-
that ultimately that if you weren't here, we're still going to pay you for that 8 hours? Or can you?
Okay, basically what we attempt to do when we have special events like a hurricane is we attempt to keep the employees whole so that a hurricane doesn't negatively impact them financially while we have them coming into work, or have them removed from work and say, sorry, you can't be here. Typically what happens is anybody that's here, we pay up to a certain threshold. So, for instance, if you're working a 12-hour shift, you get the full 12 hours. If we sequester you here, meaning you cannot leave this island, you have to live, sleep, and eat and drink out of this building, then we've captured them under FLSA law and said that you cannot leave this premises. So we should be paying them for that time. What we've done is looked at it and said, okay, there's a certain portion of that where you are at your leisure. For instance, you can go take a nap, you can go eat, or whatever the case may be here on the premises. So what we do is we say, okay, 5 hours of that 24-hour period, you now have that is sleeping time. So we won't pay for that time. So we pay them up to 19 hours for a 24-hour time frame. If they work more than that 19 hours, and they do that successively, and it increases the amount that they've worked in a week over the Fair Labor Standards Act amount of 40 hours, then we pay them overtime for that amount of time that they've spent, okay? Managers' pay has been traditionally used for things like the spring get-together or our Christmas get-together, where I say, okay, we're going to give you 4 hours off after the party. And that's manager's pay, meaning we won't deduct that out of your pay just because I'll let you go home, okay? Same thing happens for a storm in that case, where we've said, okay, you have to go, and in Holly's case, you're evacuating, but you're still going to be working for us because you're doing payroll remotely, right? I will still make you whole as if you were here working. That's what the manager's pay is.
So I have a question, Michael. So did you guys check with the labor board on that or with the town attorney? Because I've always been told at my business, because I let people sleep at night too, that I have to pay them for the hours they're there, whether they're sleeping or not, if they're on my property.
Yes, we have checked.
I'm really surprised to hear that they can't go home, but we're not going to pay them for being here.
We are paying them for being here.
But a portion.
A portion, yes.
So my question is, the people who are getting the manager's pay, even though they aren't here, is still being paid, but we're still just abiding by policy for those that were here?
Yes. We have policies that interact with each one of these segments, and that's how we have currently been managing our pay during a hurricane. One of the things that I mentioned in that update was, I think what we might need to do to make it consistency and make it so everybody understands truly what's going on is put it out in policy to state, during a hurricane, this is how we are going to establish pay. That way, you're not looking at 4 or 5 different policies to determine how one person is getting paid.
How many employees work more than that 19-hour threshold on a daily basis?
I want to say that it's probably a dozen to
Are we-
18.
Are we doing anything significant for those people? Because that's pretty hard work.
Other than paying them, no, sir.
And what
Because
about
we don't have it in policy, or
One, because we don't have it in policy, and 2, because we're by law only required to go and pay them for the time that they actually work. Now, these are all, like I said, all policy-driven type things. So, if council wanted to adjust that policy and make it so, yes, you had to pay them 24 hours whether they worked it or not because they were sequestered, that could be done. Most definitely. I'm sure that the employees would appreciate that.
So I have 2 questions. One is, how are you handling salaried employees? And if we don't have a policy of how they're going to be paid during a hurricane, and they spend their time here and they can't go home or evacuate, what's the incentive for them to stay for the next one when we
Nothing.
need them?
so then we need to change that policy.
Yes.
I mean, I
that's
know
why-
that you think we've been hard on some of this COLA and merit increase, but we're very appreciative of the staff who stayed behind. When those who didn't stay behind still got paid 100%, what's the incentive for those who did?
Nothing.
Do you see what I have a problem with that? You
Yeah.
reward where reward is due.
Yes,
That's
ma'am,
something we
and
need to
that's
change.
why I suggested that we need to have a policy that stipulates
No, I
this
agree.
instead of having 4 or 5 policies that impact pay that we're using to try and.
So how did
manage.
you handle salaried employee? How are they getting paid?
Salary employees in our policies currently for exempt employees get comp time.
So you mean
for-
they get time off
they
when?
get, they get time.
So they get
off.
nothing extra.
They get time off. They get the allowance to be off for, if it's, say it's 10 hours, that you get 10 hours worth of
But
time.
okay, let's say it's 50 hours. I don't know how. I'm
Right.
sure there are some of your salaried people who spent 50 hours here, because I saw them here
Yeah.
24/7. And my concern is, if we're giving them 50 hours of comp time, who's doing their jobs while we're comping them out? Why don't we just pay them?
I'd rather pay them.
I'd
And-
rather just pay them and say thank you so much.
So
And-
what it comes down to is that we need to change that policy then.
Yeah, unless we change the policy, we can't do it. He
mean,
Mike,
we're
I
gonna
have a que-
comp them all that time. Somebody's got to do their job while they're taking all that time off.
I have a question for you, Mike. Do these extra costs, the salary costs, are they reimbursable through our
Good
disaster
question.
relief?
Some are not.
Specifically, the employee costs, the hourly costs.
Some are not. So, for instance, I think it's exempt.
Overtime premium for hourly paid employees is reimbursable or can be filed under our FEMA. So only the overtime provision, we already had an expectation that
Right.
people were working that day.
Right.
Salaried employees, there is no ability to recoup salary because we should have already been paying them a salary. And compensatory time is not reimbursable under FEMA.
So maybe we need to look at some way to
Compensate.
reward these salaried employees who stay. Because I was here with you guys. I watched you drag around and sleep in a cot and sleep in this room. I mean, I don't know. I think that's going above and beyond your salary call.
And that's why in that update I stated that I think we need to go and make a specific policy for storms that handles all those things, because it is
Or events.
different when you get into a storm situation.
Right.
And it's not intended to have all these different policies mashing together in a storm, but that's how we've been managing it in the past.
I'm just afraid if we have another storm, they're going to say, I'll just go home and get paid. Y'all figure it out.
What would
Yes,
that?
that's a fear.
I'm more concerned about the salaried guys that are going to get 40 hours or 50 hours of comp time, Michael. You know, when, number one, then they take their comp time. They're losing, I mean, it's just a double whammy for them on cost.
You're losing police and fire.
Well, not only that, but then they got to go spend money. It's like they got a forced vacation or they don't
Right.
get any advantage. And it just, that seems to be a financial burden on the people that are leading the charge. I mean, whether it's, whatever the salary person is. I mean, each one of them carry a specific load during this process. And I would figure out a way to pay them on that, rather than give them comp time, pay them the dollars. That to me is
Well,
more beneficial to the community and to the individual.
I agree.
Well, and part of what we're going through at this point is a change in how we've handled things from the past. Okay? I have to read the actual policies that we have and run with those policies. However, some of the policies do give me flexibility, which is one of the things that I need to go and decide on, like the comp time discussion for exempt employees. There is a possibility that I have the ability under the policy already to make that change and say that salary employees during a hurricane become or regular hourly employees. That way you do get those same benefits and
So-
you do get paid.
How many exempt
So-
employees do we have? 10, 15?
Rough estimate.
25.
Probably
I'll give you
25.
a rough estimate right off the top of my head.
So a few things. Our policy was just updated this past April, and it sounds very surprising that we, or council as a collective, this is the first time that we are addressing this. If we constantly have some sort of a storm that happens every 2 years or something, and we know it's something that breaks down our employee morale, why are we not being preemptive with our policies before now?
We do have an inclement weather policy. However, we have found those.
To the wording of what that says, like we
Limit-
spoke about, it ultimately says if I leave and Jeremy stays and he works 23 hours every day, he still gets the same thing as what I'm getting when I leave. So in Jeremy's eyes, it's F it. I'm not coming back next time because why? My house, my family, the things that I'm doing to put on the line is the same thing as Tom who walks away. And we should be extremely preemptive every time we examine these policies. What can we do to very benefit our employees? The things that they do during that time frame, it blows me away that we're just now talking about this 2018, knowing that Matthew happened 2 years ago, and that we
Well,
constantly affect them these things.
and it's far back as you can think, because we've got the policy, but it doesn't address it. But like anything else, when you have an event of this magnitude, you have to analyze how do we do, what do we need to change, and that's what we're doing, which I think is exemplary.
And find a way to take
Um,
care of them.
Now, my question, Michael, is when we do the policy change, does that become part of the EOP notebook?
Yes, it would
That's what
for
I
the
thought.
pay.
Is there any other non-agenda items?
We, had those meetings with Ted Davis, Michael Lee, Ted Davis again, the Corps on their transects, and David Rouser and the Corps again with.
Right.
There was some discussion. And
Thank you, Holly.
I think
Thanks, Holly.
we were trying to use Kim as a clearinghouse for emergency relief when people call, not to handle their emergency relief, but to be able to facilitate a phone list of who to get where and how to do that. I'd be curious to see, have we gotten any progress on our FEMA agent, our individual coordinator for FEMA? Has that been assigned yet, Michael?
No one has received an individual coordinator yet. The 3 beach communities talked about that yesterday. We've had a representative from the individual programs come and meet with us, but not with the public assistance, which is where we would go through on our
individual
reimbursement.
programs. What do you explain the difference, just so I understand when people ask me these questions, I can understand what we're doing here.
The way that
What's the
FEMA
deal?
breaks things up is if you can get individual benefits if you have individual damage. So, for instance, your house, that's if you had a problem with your house
Right, I got that.
or income or things like that, that's individual.
And that person has been assigned?
That person has been assigned. They met with us yesterday. We received this morning at 8:30 the information that they have imparted out to the public for that program. I've directed Sheila to go and put that on our website as an individual information dealing with the storm. So it'll tell them who to go and contact, what to contact, what the claims process is, what the appeals process is, and so on.
Can we throw that on Facebook and maybe even shoot it to Willard?
Yes, of course. And that's typically how we would do all those press releases on that
Okay,
information.
so that's for the individual.
That's for the individual. The public assistance is just that, the assistance that we get as a public body for reimbursement expenses. They have not assigned anybody for that as of yet.
Okay, and so as Rouser was mentioning to us the other day, he's of the feeling that probably late this afternoon when Congress goes back into session, they're going to authorize $1.5 billion worth of disaster assistance for the Carolinas. And that'll probably be directed through the CBDG grants. Community Development Block Grants,
Right.
Tom, thanks.
It's hard.
Anyway, he sent us, and I forwarded to all of you guys this morning, and copied you and Ed on that. The contact person, he said that we'll be allocating those dollars. So that folds into my question of, when we met last week, one of the things, as a community, we're pretty blessed. We didn't get hit half as hard as New Hanover County, and not nearly what some other parts of the state. So it was the feeling, Michael, of your department heads that they were pretty close to having their 204s and their 214 forms and compiling everything. And I'd like to hear from you, what's your expectations on having a FEMA reimbursement package prepared and put together and ready to submit?
Typically what you end up doing is doing Schedule A and B first, which is our individual information from the EOC and how much time we spent doing what and all of our personnel and timesheets. We're very close to having that done by the end of this week. That will go into a package that will add in the debris removal. Debris removal will probably not be done for a full, say, month to 6 weeks. What typically happens is that probably in the next week or so, the FEMA representative for this region will set up a meeting. They've had them, for instance, in Matthew in Brunswick County, and all the communities went to that meeting, and they gave you your contact information, gave you all the forms, and said, here, fill these out and get them back to us. When we get those forms and all that information, then we're able to take the information we've collected, put it into the package, and send it off to them. So last year, or last time we had a storm in Matthew, we were one of the first communities that already had our stuff ready to go and literally handed them the package at the meeting.
Do we specifically ask about some items that we would like to ask for the stars when we go for reimbursement, whether it's the corner of the harbor that may have sustained damage, or it's things that we had, like cleaning out Henniger's ditch, which was something that we wanted to do, and now that we've had a storm and it's in debris in there, maybe it's an opportunity for us to gather some funds for that. Maybe it's additional sedimentation that we got in the lake and we can offset some of those costs. If we don't ask, I mean, now's the time for us to ask for absolutely everything we can. And
And what you said
And-
earlier, Steve,
and
I
we-
didn't know, is the employee time reimbursable through those asks?
Partly.
So let's ask.
Well, and we do every time we have a storm. This isn't any different than Matthew. There's nothing different between what is being provided this time compared to the last.
So if we came up with a number we were gonna pay those salaried people, we could ask for that.
And we'll go through that same process and have it all embedded in there and send it off.
And I like what you said, we were first last time, we wanna be first this time, and Rouser did indicate that was certainly an advantage to be in there.
We're definitely ahead of the game, yes, ma'am.
And just another question, and I don't know what your procedure is for this, but I know there's a lot of people out swimming in the ocean. Have we done any testing or water quality testing on our waters?
We do not. The state does the water quality testing. One of the things that makes us a little bit unique compared to other beach communities is we have no outfalls to the ocean. So we don't have runoff that goes directly into the ocean. The only place where we do have that is when we do an emergency run to the beach from the lake. So they come in, they do testing on that.
I understand that, but what's in our ocean right now is not our water anyway. It's that river water and everything else in the world. And I know that some other beach communities are doing outside testing. Is that something we should look at?
If you'd like to do
And
outside testing,
I
we
don't
can.
know. I mean, I'm
We
just
have
throwing that out for you.
we haven't done it in the past, but we can. I mean, it's just nothing more than grab samples of the water and sending it off for
Is that very expensive?
well, the one person that would know exactly how much.
I mean, I think that's a very proactive thing for us to do.
I would think that it's a couple of $1,000s. And would it be FEMA reimbursable? I don't have a clue.
Or RLT.
I mean, I don't know what y'all's
It
thoughts
could be,
are, but
what about through RLT, because it's affecting activities from our visitors coming down currently?
I mean, safety.
Probably not.
Yeah, probably not. Is there a way that you can just find out when the state might be doing their testing?
Yeah,
We
let's
can
put that into
definitely
play.
There's no need to double up if they're going to get ready to do it too.
I mean,
We can definitely contact. Usually that goes through the health department in the county and then through the state with their health department, so we can contact them
Yeah,
to
the
find out
quickest we
when
could
they're
do that
planning
would be
on
I would like
awesome.
to look at that, Michael, because we don't have any outfalls, but we do have the Cape Fear River that gives us a tidal influence. And the other day when we were out, it was influencing very dramatically way south of Curie Beach.
Oh, sure it does, yes.
So,
Right.
we're seeing a pretty heavy influence out of the Cape Fear, which is a significant outfall into our beach. And we're not sure what's in Cape Fear. And frankly, I don't want to wait around for New Hamilton County. or
Right.
Bloomington. I don't see why we couldn't do a couple of.
I think it makes us a very proactive community to do that.
And I
It's
don't,
my personal opinion.
right, I don't mind doing that either, but I want to check to make sure we're not duplicating something the state's going to do within the next day or two.
The other thing, Michael, is can we make available on the website or the mandatory evacuation notice? In order to get reimbursement for individuals on evacuation, they have to show that there was a mandatory evacuation.
I'm pretty sure it's out there
They're all-
already,
it's
but I'll double check.
Let's put it, if we could, can we just put it back out?
Yeah.
Do we have anyone that's facilitating, or can we get with maybe Pleasure Island Relief or someone, maybe the folks that do the annual accounting, someone to help people fill out some of these FEMA forms? We've got a lot of folks in the service industry that have been without work for a couple of weeks, and they're juggling daycare, no employment, and their own household problems. And dealing with government paperwork is a pretty overwhelming task. If you're not doing it every day, Jeremy, if you didn't do those flood maps every day and you had to go fill out that FEMA form, I mean, is there someone we can encourage, and Michael, whether it's the folks that do our
Taxes.
Now that we have a contact for the individual aid, yes, it would be FEMA and that contact for the individual aid. They
we're
have,
going to sit someone down at a table and help our residents fill out those forms?
that is what we were told yesterday, yes, sir.
Good.
That's what FEMA
I do
does.
know, and I don't know how they're doing it, but I've known several individuals who've already had FEMA reps on their property. So they're
Oh.
figuring it out somehow. Yeah.
There's definitely FEMA reps that are around, especially for the individuals. They
Versus
set up
Flooded
their
out.
county system several weeks ago. They're just now getting down to the beach communities in them to set up individual reps for those beaches. And then it'll just spread out from there,
When we know that they've set up a station, we'll make a public announcement.
of course.
Good.
Now, the station may not be here on the island, keep that
Right,
in
maybe
mind,
Monkey Junction or
because they're gonna do it in the county, so it could be Monkey
Right.
Junction.
I have a few things. So when Wednesday at 8 p.m., we put the mandatory evacuation. There's a few things I'd like to address, and I think we need to inform our residents and our community about. Number one, two town council members chose to stay there the entire time. During that time, Leanne and I constantly spoke about the EOC. However, it's been brought to my attention that our residents don't know what that means, or at the chain of command, or the things that were put in play with that. It was something that was constantly a lot of messages. Even now, everyone's, I don't know what that means. What's the process? What's this? So I think we need to inform our community when we decide to go into an event, whether it's a storm, anything, that they understand what the EOC is, the chain of command, and typically what to expect.
The
Right.
entire plan is out on our website, but yes, sir, I understand what you're saying is add additional,
To get to it on the website takes a handful of clicks versus someone just specifically for a brief moment saying, hey, let me give you a quick rundown.
press release type thing, and I actually think in our first initial press release, we had a specific link to our plan, which is where all that documentation is.
I tell people that the downside is during a time frame of that, your emotion is extremely high, and you just need somebody to calmly tell you what's going on versus saying, go click these links.
And some of them may not have internet.
Exact. Some may not have power. So I think
Yeah.
going forward, anytime that's going to happen, that we immediately get with Island Gazette, a quick video on Facebook, maybe something with the police, the fire, have them hop on and let people know what's going on, because some of our residents thought that me and Leanne were making those decisions, and that's not necessarily true. It was the EOC managers. All we were doing was trying to convey to the residents what was happening and to keep them informed. So everyone would send Leanne something or I something, or when Steve came back, would send him things, getting a little pissed off, like, why are you doing this? Why are you doing that? We don't make that call. And I think that we need to reiterate that to our residents so they understand there is a chain of command. And when that kicks in, we take that back seat, and yet we're still there to kind of give a head nod and give our thoughts and our process on that.
Right.
But I know that's something that I'm pretty sure Leanne dealt with that daily, because I know,
Yeah.
I definitely know I did. And that's the last thing is that I personally chose to stay. That's, as a property owner, I personally chose to stay. What the rest of the town council does, where they stay, come back, they stay and leave, that's on them. It was a mandatory evacuation, and I know some residents out there have been bombarding me in regards to Tom, Steve, and Joe leaving. That's on them. Whether they leave, they come, or they just completely leave.
Well, we voted for
It's-
mandatory evacuation, so that's
Well,
why
hold on
we-
one second, Tom. So one thing you have to think of is that our council are people just like our residents are people. They have families they need to take care of. They have houses they need to pay for. We're not all up here sending multimillionaires. So whatever their comfort level is, our residents need to respect that. Whether you think that we're on council and we need to drown with the boat if the boat goes down, that's your own expectation. That's not their expectations. They have family that they need to worry about. So the things that I personally just want to say is that be caring. During this time, I know emotions are high, but you need to understand that their comfort zone for them was best to not be here. Respect that, because I'm seeing a lot of people out there bashing the three of you. And a lot of people have reached out to me about that. And I tell them the same thing. It's kind of rude. Because if someone else left, give them that respect. Let them know that that's their comfort zone is, you know what? I think it's going to be a category 4. I need to get the hell out of here and take care of myself and my family and do the best I can to inform our community. I think that the majority of us did that. And if you have an issue with that, take it to the person personally. You don't need to go out there on Facebook and try to bash one of us because of the fact that we chose not to be here or did choose to be here. Just understanding that at the end of the day, the things that we care of here is for our community. So for us to give you that information and do the best we can and share with that, that's all we can do in regards from us. So if your expectations are extremely different and you're completely pissed off about that, that's on you. That's not on us. The position we're here is to inform you and make the best calls that we can. And if you don't understand that EOC and the things that we're doing to be comfortable, then again, that's on the residents, because I think the 5 of us did the best that we could with the circumstances that were handed to us, and did our own individually as well as a collective. So that's all I gotta say about that. And thank you guys for everything you guys did during this.
Thank you. Anything else for the non-agenda items?
Yes, Saturday, I believe it's 6:30 Saturday, we're supposed to have a firework event. Is that correct? Is it Saturday?
As
Correct.
far as I know,
Just that-
as of yesterday, yes.
So Saturday, 6:30 at the gazebo.
Right.
Our fire marshal has asked us to look at those eco-friendly fireworks, and we kind of vacillated on that. I think we all kind of decided as a group collectively, as a council, that maybe it would be a good thing to do, and have the band, and we're trying to get maybe Island Men or someone, and then to come down. They've got some food to give away or cook. They may or may not do that. It may be someone else. Pleasure Island Disaster Relief is going to have a little table down there probably. Greg Reynolds is coordinating all of that. But I do think, Michael, what Greg and I talked and what I think council was hoping was that we could really make this a community event. We didn't have a island day. But if we could get our residents out and give them an opportunity, I'd like to see staff down there. I'd like to see as many of the town employees that are available that would like to come down. I believe the town would like to say thank you publicly to those employees, whether they're in stormwater or operations or first responders or in management, all the EOC people, everyone in town wants to say thank you to our employees. So I would ask you to get your department heads to coordinate who can be down there. I did ask, just so you guys know, I asked Greg to find someone to MC it so that it would not be a political event, okay? Mike Worley's unable to do that, so Greg's going to keep looking. But rather than have
Dan.
the mayor up there and him getting heat from some people and not others, or Leanne up there and everyone saying, you know, it's all a political thing, or Joe Dan or I or Tom, we're trying to find someone that can MC it. MC is simply introducing the band and bringing up staff people. Chief, we'd like to get your officers up there. I want to make sure Alan's guys are there. I mean, I think it's an opportunity to get our residents out to say hello to each other, glad you made it through the storm, have a little blow-off time, and really say thanks to our staff. We didn't have the Dragon Boat. We're not having the Rib Fest. So this is an opportunity. So, Michael, I'm going to ask you to get senior, your department heads to figure out Gil,
Who gave you that
Eric,
idea?
right?
Who gave you that idea?
You did.
Anyway, I'm just like, what I like to do
Your
is I know
idea,
the
Joe
tents-
Dan, was to do the beef from the
Yeah.
Island Men.
The-
They've rejected that
yeah,
thoroughly.
the-
You
but
guys
okay.
are good with this feel-good.
we have tents that say Town of Caroline Beach on them, don't we? Pop-up tents.
Probably for the police and fire, but not for the rest of the town, no.
I would love to, if we can get the staff that was here, to, if possible, get a lot of them at those tents frequently, because unfortunately, you don't know who some of these people are unless you know who the cops or the firemen, wastewater, all the operations people. We don't necessarily know, residents don't know who they are. We get them there. That way people can go by, get some high fives, get some hugs, some thank yous, you know. I think having them in front of people is really going to make it an awesome idea. I think we should push for that by far.
No kissing, Joe Dan.
I said hugs and high fives.
Oh, I thought you said hugs and kisses.
Yeah, you did.
And I know this will impact their, you know,
Morale.
A lot of them are still trying to recover from the storm, clean up around their house and that kind of stuff. But I think it is important for the community to be able to give them their appreciation through applause or high fives.
Yeah,
hugs,
making an event.
whatever.
If we can, make it an event on Facebook. That way we can start pushing that, get everybody.
There's one out there with the Pleasure Island Chamber of Commerce has one. A number of us have shared it. We did put out a little comment that it's for the residents. Greg wanted to do some advertising. I said, Greg, why don't you just leave it on the island and just get the Carolina Beach
Yeah.
folks? We don't need a bunch of people down here. The fire marshal wants to check out those fireworks.
Which will save us money
Yeah.
because they're a lot less expensive and they also take a lot less
They're
volunteers.
twice as expensive,
Are they?
twice as much.
But the thing
They
is
have less
that
volunteers.
if you go to those fireworks,
Volunteers don't cost us. So
Well,
Yeah.
that's true.
what he's saying is
That's
he
true.
wanted to go weekly.
It's the
go
debris.
once a month or every other week. So I have a real concern about the cost of the fireworks.
Yeah.
We owe it to Buddy, but they're twice as much.
And the
Greg's trying to get a
debris.
better price, but twice
Yeah,
as much.
Okay. But they are safer.
to my understanding, they don't drop as much debris.
That's
When
what
you're
I-
standing at that boardwalk, it feels like somebody's literally throwing dirt on you, and you are trying to dodge it. It is.
All right. Anything else for the cause? Nope. Okay, we're dismissed.
See you guys tonight.